This is the Sorenson hold. So how this one works is you're gonna need a GHD machine, obviously, and how I want you to set up is make sure, first and foremost, that the pads are nice and tight so there's not too much wiggle in them. With a Sorenson hold, usually there's stability in general because it's an isometric movement, so it doesn't matter too much. But when you get in the GHD, obviously you're going to have your stomach face towards the ground. And then the big point I want to make on this, just because this is mainly for that back rehab, is we want to make sure, number one, that our ankles are dorsiflexed. So what that means is that I'm not trying to flex my calf like this. So I'm not trying to flex my calf. I'm trying to pull my toes up towards my shins as I hold this position. And then from there, we want to set up the length of the pads in the back so that the pad in the front here is basically just behind my hip. So how this looks is full setup what the Sorenson hold actually looks like is I'm going to be holding this position, but it's super important that my hip crease is basically hanging just off the pads. I don't want to have it so far out though, because I want to be able to have a little bit of stability at the knee, right? So in other words, I don't want my hip to be way out here just because that will put a lot more pressure on my knee, but I also don't want my hip to be blocked by the pads because I do want my hamstrings working a decent amount here, as well as my glutes, but hamstrings for sure. So how this works is, again, you're just holding the position. If I put my hands above my head or put my hands out like this, it's gonna get harder. If I keep my hands down at my side or at my sides here, or I'm just kind of give myself a big bear hug, right? That's gonna be a little bit easier. So the goal though is for this specific program is to make sure that the low back starts working, right? We want the low back to work. We just don't wanna have any pinching sensation. And so really try hard and make sure that you are not extending or hyperextending the back like this, right? It's most likely gonna make it a little bit easier. But if we feel any pinch in the back, then most likely we're hyperextending too much. So I always tell people to kind of crunch your abs, but we're not going into a hollow body position. We're just trying to keep our abs tight so that our spine is nice and neutral. At the same time that I pull those toes up towards the shins like I was talking about before, so I can use those hamstrings a lot, right? And then make sure the toes are just faced straight towards the ground. In other words, they're not way out, right? So just face towards the ground, and then keeping that spine nice and neutral as I hold this position, okay? Like I mentioned before, your back is going to work, and that's totally fine. When you're holding these, you're basically going around in RP 7 to 8, which just means you're not going to complete failure, but I want it to be like a little bit of a challenge. So that is the Sorenson hold specifically for this back rehab program.